Flibbert Wompkins was having what could generously be described as the worst day in the history of intergalactic insurance, which is saying something considering that his species had invented the concept of acceptable losses 3 millennia before humans had figured out fire. The emergency klaxon in the headquarters of Probabilistic Survival Solutions Incorporated was making a sound that roughly translated to "We're all doomed" in 14 different languages, including one that consisted entirely of interpretive dance. Flibbert's 7 eyes were darting frantically between 17 different holographic displays, each one showing numbers that defied not only logic, but several fundamental laws of mathematics. "What do you mean the entire Kepler sector has filed simultaneous claims?" Flibbert shrieked at his assistant, a particularly nervous Rigelian named Blunderstook, who had the unfortunate habit of molting whenever stressed. The office floor was already ankle-deep in purple scales. "Sir, it's not just Kepler anymore," Blunderstook wheezed, his voice crackling like static electricity through his gill slits. "The claims are spreading. Proxima Centauri, Wolf 359, even the forbidden death zones of Sector Zeta. Every single Class 15 Deathworld policy we've ever written is being activated simultaneously. For context, Class 15 Deathworlds were planets so horrifically dangerous that insurance companies typically classified them somewhere between statistical impossibility and mathematical joke. These were worlds where the rain was acidic, the wildlife had evolved specifically to eat insurance adjusters, and the local bacteria had formed their own hostile civilizations. The kind of places where a simple camping trip required a will, a priest, and a very good relationship with whatever deity handled paperwork in the afterlife. Flibbert's species, the Actuarians, had built their entire civilization on the beautiful predictability of risk assessment. They could calculate the exact probability of a vegan death slug surviving a supernova down to 17 decimal places. They had mathematical models that could predict when a star would sneeze. Their computers could forecast the likelihood of finding edible food in a space station cafeteria with frightening accuracy. But this was madness. "Show me the Sol system reports," Flibbert demanded, his primary tentacle stabbing at the holographic interface with the desperation of someone trying to solve a puzzle made entirely of explosive jelly. The numbers that appeared made him wish he had chosen a career in something safer, like professional black hole diving or Yarian death cricket commentary. "According to our models," Blunderstook stammered, "the third planet in the Sol system should have had its entire population extinct approximately 57 times over in the past year alone. But instead, our payout department is being flooded with receipts for something called extreme sports insurance claims. What in the name of Zorbak's twisted tentacles is bungee jumping?" Flibbert stared at the data streams flowing across his desk like digital waterfalls of pure confusion. His species had insured death worlds across 17 galaxies for over 4,000 years. They had perfected the art of calculating exactly how many ways a sentient being could die on any given hostile planet, usually expressed in a number so large it required its own zip code. The standard formula was beautifully simple. Hostile environment factor multiplied by species fragility coefficient, divided by local technological adaptation level, minus the universal luck constant. The result was always a neat, tidy number that explained exactly why most civilizations avoided Class 15 worlds like they avoided Yarian death cricket commentators at dinner parties. But these humans, they had somehow turned the entire galactic insurance industry into what could best be described as a mathematical nightmare wrapped in actuarial chaos and served with a side of statistical impossibility. "Sir," Blunderstook whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of his own nervous molting, "there's something else. The humans have started filing claims for activities they call fun. They're deliberately seeking out the most dangerous possible experiences on their planet, and then they're doing them on purpose for recreation." Flibbert felt something that his species had never experienced in their long, calculating history. Pure, unadulterated bewilderment. The actuarians prided themselves on their ability to quantify everything. They had insurance policies for the heat death of the universe. They offered extended warranties on quantum uncertainty. Their slogan, carved in 17-foot letters across their corporate headquarters, read, "If it exists, we can calculate its demise." But humans were doing something that violated every principle of survival that evolution had spent billions of years perfecting. They were actively, enthusiastically, and with remarkable creativity finding new ways to almost die. And then they were doing it again. "Get me a direct line to our field investigator," Flibbert ordered, his voice carrying the tone of someone who was about to make a decision he would definitely regret later. "I'm sending someone to this Earth place to figure out what the blazing supernovas is going on down there." The holographic display flickered ominously, as if the universe itself was trying to warn him that some questions were better left unanswered. Griselda Flumpernook had been Probabilistic Survival Solutions' top field investigator for exactly 437 years, 2 months, and 16 days. She prided herself on this precision because actuarians found comfort in numbers, the way other species found comfort in warm blankets or recreational narcotics. She had investigated insurance fraud on planets where the gravity was strong enough to turn visitors into very thin pancakes. She had tracked down false claims on worlds where the atmosphere was composed entirely of weaponized perfume. She had even solved the infamous Rigelian pudding incident of Stardate 447, though she still woke up screaming about sentient desserts. But nothing had prepared her for Earth. The problem began the moment her investigation pod entered the Sol system's third planet's atmosphere. Her ship's danger assessment computer, a piece of technology so sophisticated it could predict the exact moment a tourist would step on a Venusian landmine, immediately began having what could best be described as an electronic, nervous breakdown. "Warning! Warning! Lethal environment detected!" The computer shrieked in 17 different alarm tones. "Atmospheric composition contains 21% oxygen. Explosive levels. Evacuate immediately." "Computer, that's normal for this species," Griselda muttered, her 3 primary manipulator arms dancing across the control console. "Humans breathe oxygen. It's in their file." "Impossible," the computer responded. "Oxygen is highly combustible. One spark and the entire planet should explode. And yet here they are, not exploded," Griselda observed, with the kind of dry patience that comes from centuries of dealing with hysterical artificial intelligences. The computer's response was to play the galactic equivalent of hold music, while it presumably had an existential crisis about the fundamental nature of atmospheric chemistry. Griselda's first observation point was something humans called a beach, which her cultural database described as a recreational area where land meets water. What the database had failed to mention was that humans had somehow turned this perfectly innocent geographical feature into a cosmic-scale insurance nightmare. She watched through her cloaked observation pod as hundreds of humans deliberately exposed their unprotected skin to a Class G star's radiation while lying motionless on granulated rock particles. Her species would have considered this a particularly creative form of execution. "Note for file," she dictated to her recording device, "humans appear to engage in voluntary solar radiation exposure for pleasure. Computer, cross-reference this behavior with known forms of intelligent life." No matches found," the computer replied, its voice now carrying a distinct note of panic. "Suggestion, file formal complaint with universe management." But the beach was merely the beginning of Griselda's confusion. Within her first Earth hour, she had witnessed humans engaging in activities that violated so many safety protocols that her insurance calculator had given up and started displaying error messages in languages that didn't exist yet. Surfing, for instance, which involved deliberately positioning oneself on a small floating platform while massive walls of water attempted to crush said human into component molecules. According to Griselda's calculations, the probability of survival should have been somewhere between absolutely not and are you completely insane? Yet not only were the humans surviving, they were laughing while doing it. "Computer, analyze the laughter patterns," Griselda commanded. "Are they experiencing some form of species-wide neurological breakdown?" "Negative," the computer responded. "Biometric analysis indicates genuine enjoyment. Stress levels are—" "This cannot be correct. Stress levels are actually decreasing during potentially fatal activities." Griselda's sensory stalks twitched in disbelief. Every known species in the galaxy experienced increased stress when faced with mortal danger. It was such a fundamental biological principle that insurance companies had built their entire premium structure around it. But humans seem to have missed that particular evolutionary memo entirely. She followed one human specimen, a male approximately 30 Earth years old, who began his day by strapping wheels to his feet and launching himself down a concrete incline at speeds that would have been illegal in several star systems. Her pod's medical assessment array kept flashing warnings that roughly translated to "immediate hospitalization required," while the human continued to execute maneuvers that defied 3 different laws of physics. "Note for file," Griselda continued. "Human subject appears to be intentionally challenging gravitational forces using primitive personal transportation devices. Probability of severe injury, 97.4%. Actual injury sustained, none. Request emergency consultation with Department of Universal Constants." The human then proceeded to consume what his species called energy drinks, beverages that contained enough stimulants to power a small spacecraft, before engaging in something called parkour, which appeared to be the art of moving through urban environments while pretending that the ground was optional. Griselda watched in horror as the human leaped between buildings, vaulted over obstacles, and treated the force of gravity like a casual suggestion rather than an immutable law of nature. "Computer, are we absolutely certain these are the same species that filed our insurance claims? Genetic analysis confirms human DNA," the computer wailed. "But their behavior suggests they are either immortal or completely unaware of the concept of death." That's when Griselda made the discovery that would haunt her for the rest of her extremely long life. She found something humans called a sports bar. The revelation came, as most profound truths do, during what should have been a routine extreme sports accident. Dr. Bafflebonk was conducting his final research experiment, attempting to solve the ultimate question of human probability theory while performing something called quantum surfing through a collapsing wormhole. It was the kind of activity that would have sent his former colleagues running for their sanity medication, but which he now found merely moderately challenging. As he calculated the final equations that would explain humanity's impossible relationship with danger, the wormhole began behaving in ways that violated several fundamental laws of space-time. Instead of panic, Dr. Bafflebonk felt the familiar rush of clarity that came with imminent cosmic peril. That's when he saw it, hidden in the quantum fluctuations of the collapsing space-time tunnel, revealed only to someone experiencing the precise combination of mathematical focus and mortal terror that had become his specialty, was a pattern that changed everything. "Maximilian!" he screamed into his communication device while performing what could generously be described as emergency dimensional navigation. "Get everyone on this channel! I've found it!" Within moments, Humans from across the galaxy were connected to the communication network, most of them engaged in their own various forms of recreational near-death experiences. "The secret!" Dr. Bafflebonk announced, his voice crackling through 17 different dimensions as he surfed the edges of reality itself, "isn't that humans are lucky. It's that humans are bored." The communication channel filled with confused sounds from dozens of species, including several that consisted entirely of mathematical profanity. "Think about it," Dr. Bafflebonk continued, executing a maneuver that made physics professors across the galaxy weep with confusion. Every other species in the universe evolved on planets that were trying to kill them. But once they developed technology, they made their worlds safe. They eliminated the challenge. The pattern was becoming clear as he spoke, revealed through the unique perspective that only came from calculating theoretical physics while hurtling through unstable space-time. Humans are the only species that achieved planetary safety, and then decided it was boring. Every other civilization reaches technological maturity and stops growing. But humans got bored with safety and went looking for new ways to almost die. Maximilian Daredevil, who was currently conducting a board meeting while base jumping off a comet, began laughing with the kind of manic glee that suggested enlightenment or complete mental breakdown. "He's right!" Maximilian shouted. "We're not daredevils because we don't understand danger. We're daredevils because we understand danger so well that we got bored with avoiding it." The implications were staggering. Every other species had treated survival as an end goal, but humans had treated it as a starting point. "Look at your own transformation," Dr. Bafflebonk called out to the alien executives who were listening while engaged in their own extreme activities. 6 months ago, you were terrified of everything. Now you're calculating insurance premiums while surfing through asteroid fields. What changed? "We stopped being bored," Flibbert realized, his voice carrying the wonder of someone who had just discovered that the universe was far more interesting than he had ever imagined. "Exactly," Dr. Bafflebonk confirmed. "Boredom is the enemy of evolution. Every other species achieved safety and then stopped evolving, but humans achieved safety and then invented new challenges to keep evolving. The pattern was everywhere once they knew to look for it. Human history wasn't a story of survival against impossible odds. It was a story of a species that kept raising the stakes because winning had become too easy. We domesticated fire, then invented fireworks, Maximilian added, his enthusiasm growing to proportions that made supernovas feel inadequate. We conquered the oceans, then invented surfing. We learned to fly, then invented skydiving. Every time we solved a survival problem, we turned the solution into a new game. Dr. Bafflebonk successfully navigated the final quantum eddy of the collapsing wormhole, his calculations complete just as he emerged into normal space with a precision that would have been impossible without the enhanced cognitive state that came from nearly dying in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. "The universe isn't trying to kill humans," he announced with the solemnity of someone delivering the most important scientific discovery in galactic history. "The universe is trying to entertain them." The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that usually preceded either cosmic enlightenment or the heat death of the universe. Every dangerous planet, every hostile environment, every Class 15 Deathworld, Dr. Bafflebonk continued, it's not a threat to human survival, it's a playground for human creativity. Species across the galaxy began to understand what they had witnessed. Humans hadn't broken the laws of probability through luck or superior genetics. They had broken them through the simple application of treating existence itself as the universe's most elaborate entertainment system. The insurance crisis wasn't caused by humans being reckless, Flibbert realized, his voice filled with the awe of someone who had just solved a puzzle that had been confusing him for his entire career. It was caused by humans being creative. Every extreme sport, every impossible stunt, every death-defying adventure, Maximilian added, wasn't humans trying to die. It was humans trying to find new ways to live. Dr. Bafflebonk floated in his escape pod, looking out at the stars with the satisfaction of someone who had finally found the answer to the question that had been driving him to the edge of sanity. "Gentle beings," he said into the communication device, his voice carrying the weight of universal truth. "We have spent millennia trying to calculate the probability of human survival, but we were asking the wrong question." He paused, watching a nearby pulsar spin with the casual indifference of someone who had just quantum surfed through a wormhole and lived to tell about it. The question isn't whether humans will survive. The question is what impossible thing they'll do next, just to see if they can. The sports bar was where Griselda's understanding of reality went to die a horrible, confused death. She had expected to find humans consuming fermented plant matter, which was relatively normal behavior for most galactic species. What she had not expected was to discover that humans had somehow weaponized the concept of recreational viewing. Inside the establishment, dozens of humans sat transfixed by glowing screens, displaying other humans engaged in activities that made her previous observations look like children's tea parties. Her cultural analysis module began cataloging what it witnessed with the dedication of a device having a complete mental breakdown. "American football," it announced in a voice that suggested it was questioning its own existence, "involves armored humans deliberately colliding with each other at high velocity while fighting over possession of an inflated animal skin." "That sounds manageable," Griselda muttered, adjusting her observation equipment. "Ice hockey requires humans to balance on thin metal blades while moving at dangerous speeds across frozen water, wielding wooden clubs and attempting to strike a rubber projectile into a net while other humans try to physically prevent them. Still within acceptable parameters of rugby appears to be American football, but without the armor." Griselda's four hearts stopped beating in perfect synchronization. But the true horror came when she realized that the humans watching these activities were experiencing physiological responses that suggested they were somehow participating in the danger by proxy. Their heart rates increased, their stress hormones spiked, and their vocal responses indicated genuine emotional investment in the outcomes. "They're experiencing sympathetic adrenaline responses," she whispered into her recording device, "while consuming liquid depressants and foods high enough in sodium to preserve a Yarian battlecruiser. Computer, how are they not all dead?" "Unknown!" the computer shrieked. "Current theory, humans have achieved some form of biological impossibility." That's when Marcus Thunderbottom, the human sitting nearest to her cloaked observation point, began explaining the finer points of extreme sports to his companion. "Yeah, so last weekend I went skydiving," Marcus said casually, as if describing a trip to purchase groceries. "Jumped out of a perfectly good airplane at 15,000 feet. Amazing rush." Griselda's recording device began smoking. "Then tomorrow I'm going bungee jumping off the Queensboro Bridge. Gonna be epic." "Bungee jumping?" her computer whispered in a voice that suggested it was preparing its last will and testament. "Involves attaching an elastic cord to one's ankles and deliberately falling from great heights, trusting that the mathematical properties of rubber will prevent death." That's not how physics works," Griselda protested. "Tell that to the humans," the computer replied, with what could only be described as electronic despair. But Marcus wasn't finished destroying Griselda's worldview. "Oh, and next month I'm doing this thing called volcano boarding in Nicaragua. You literally surf down an active volcano on a piece of plywood. My insurance company loves me," he laughed, apparently unaware that his statement contained enough irony to power a small solar system. Griselda began taking frantic notes. Her species had developed insurance mathematics over thousands of years, creating elegant formulas that could predict disaster with beautiful precision. But humans seem to be treating these carefully calculated risks like a shopping list of recreational activities. Computer, cross-reference human recreational activities with our current Class 15 Deathworld insurance policies. Yet the computer's response was a sound that roughly translated to, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," in 47 different languages. "Sir," it finally managed, "93% of activities humans consider fun are classified as certain death scenarios in our standard risk assessment protocols. They are systematically engaging in behavior that should result in immediate species extinction. And yet," Griselda observed, watching Marcus order something called buffalo wings that appeared to be coated in substances hot enough to melt spacecraft hull plating, "they continue to exist." She decided to conduct a more direct investigation. Activating her universal translator and adjusting her appearance to approximate human physiology, she approached Marcus's table. "Excuse me," she said, trying to sound casual, despite the fact that her vocal cords were designed for an atmosphere with 30% more nitrogen. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about extreme sports." "Oh, yeah," Marcus replied with enthusiasm that would have been considered dangerous in several star systems. "You into any extreme stuff?" "I work in risk assessment," Griselda replied carefully. "Cool. So you must know all about calculating danger levels and stuff." "Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to ask about. Don't you find these activities terrifying?" Marcus looked at her as if she had asked whether water was wet. "Well, yeah, that's the whole point. The scarier it is, the more fun it gets. I mean, what's the point of doing something if there's no chance you might die horribly?" Griselda's notes at this point devolved into what could generously be called frantic scribbling, and less generously called the written equivalent of screaming. But what about self-preservation instincts?" she managed. "Oh, those are totally overrated," Marcus replied, consuming a beverage that her scanner identified as containing enough alcohol to sterilize medical equipment. "I mean, my buddy Jake does free solo rock climbing. No ropes, no safety gear, just you and a 1,000-foot drop. He says it's the most alive he's ever felt." At this point, Griselda's computer began playing what sounded suspiciously like funeral music. "Does Jake have life insurance?" she asked weakly. "Tons of it. His insurance company keeps trying to drop him, but Jake just finds new companies. He's got like 17 different policies now. Says it's become a hobby." That night, Griselda transmitted her preliminary report back to Flibbert Wompkins with trembling manipulator appendages. "Sir," she began, "I have discovered why our insurance models are failing. Humans don't just live on a Class 15 death world. They have somehow turned survival itself into a competitive sport." Flibbert Wompkins read Griselda's report 3 times before his brain accepted that the words were actually arranged in that particular order on purpose. Then he read it 17 more times, hoping the universe would somehow reorganize itself into something that made sense. It did not. "Emergency board meeting," he screamed across the corporate headquarters of Probabilistic Survival Solutions, his voice carrying the kind of panic usually reserved for supernova announcements or cafeteria menu changes. Within moments, the conference room filled with the galaxy's most distinguished insurance executives, each representing a different species approach to actuarial mathematics. There was Squishbert from the Rigelian Risk Assessment Consortium, whose people had invented the concept of acceptable losses when their home planet was mostly composed of unstable explosives. Throgmorton represented the Yarian Statistical Certainty Corporation, a species so obsessed with probability that they calculated the odds of their own thoughts before thinking them. And then there was Binglewump from Universal Death Guarantee Limited, whose company's slogan was, "When you're dead, and we'll prove it mathematically." "Gentle beings," Flibbert began, his voice cracking like a Venusian wind chime in a hurricane, "we have a problem that transcends everything we thought we knew about risk assessment." He activated the holographic display showing Griselda's compiled data. The numbers that appeared made several executives immediately reach for their emergency anxiety medications. According to our field investigation, Flibbert continued, humans have somehow achieved what can only be described as weaponized survival. They are actively seeking out experiences that our computers classify as immediate death scenarios and treating them as recreational activities. Squishbert's gelatinous form began vibrating with distress. That's impossible. Our models account for every known form of intelligent life. We've ensured civilizations that play catch with neutron stars. We've written policies for species that use black holes as swimming pools. And yet, Flibbert replied grimly, humans have somehow broken our entire system by doing something that should be theoretically impossible. They're having fun while almost dying. Throgmorton's 17 eye stalks swiveled frantically as he processed this information. His species communicated primarily through statistical analysis, so his response came in the form of rapidly shifting probability calculations that roughly translated to, "What the blazing supernovas is happening? Show them the claims data," Flibbert ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a cascade of insurance claims flowing in from Earth-based policies. The sheer volume was staggering, but it was the nature of the claims that caused several executives to begin hyperventilating in their respective atmospheric mixtures. Claim number 47,912, Flibbert read aloud, filed by one Jeremy Bombadillo for minor injuries sustained while attempting to ride a bicycle down a mountain while blindfolded. Claim approved and paid. Jeremy subsequently used the payout money to purchase better protective equipment so he could try the same thing again, but faster. A collective gasp echoed through the conference room. Claim number 63,208, filed by Rebecca Snodgrass for equipment replacement after my parachute failed to deploy during my 300th skydiving attempt. Claim approved and paid. Rebecca used the money to book her 400th jump, stating that the near-death experience had given her valuable insights into the nature of gravity. Binglewump began making sounds that his species used to indicate the approach of cosmic-level catastrophe. "But here's the truly horrifying part," Flibbert continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a supernova explosion. "Our actuarial projections show that humans are not only surviving these experiences at rates that violate several fundamental laws of physics, they're actually becoming more likely to survive with each attempt." "That's impossible," Squishbert bubbled. "Risk accumulation should increase mortality probability, not decrease it." "Tell that to Winston Gigglesnort," Flibbert replied, pulling up another file, who has filed 237 separate claims for injuries sustained during his hobby of extreme ironing, which apparently involves taking clothes-pressing equipment to dangerous locations and operating it while engaged in hazardous activities. His survival rate has improved by 17% over the past year, despite the fact that he's now pressing shirts while base jumping off active volcanoes. The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that usually preceded either enlightenment or total mental breakdown. Throgmorton was the first to speak, his mathematical mind struggling to process data that defied every algorithm his species had developed over millennia. If humans are systematically converting high-risk scenarios into recreational activities, and their survival rates are improving rather than declining, then our entire premium structure is not just wrong, Binglewump finished. It's catastrophically, universe-shatteringly, impossibly wrong. Worse than that, Flibbert added, displaying the next set of data. Our analysis shows that humans are starting to export their approach to other species. We've received reports of Rigelian tourists attempting something called volcano surfing after visiting Earth. 3 Yarian merchants have filed claims for injuries sustained while bungee jumping using equipment they purchased from human manufacturers. The conference room erupted in chaos as executives began shouting in 17 different languages, most of which consisted primarily of mathematical profanity. "Silence!" Flibbert roared. "There's more. Our economic analysis department has calculated that if current trends continue, every major insurance company in the galaxy will be bankrupt within 6 standard months. But that's not the worst part." Everyone leaned forward, despite the fact that several species in attendance didn't technically have the ability to lean. "The worst part," Flibber said, his voice carrying the weight of impending cosmic doom, "is that humans have started their own insurance companies. And they're offering policies with premiums that are mathematically impossible according to every known principle of risk assessment." That's when the holographic display showed the advertisement that would haunt insurance executives across the galaxy for generations. "Adrenaline Assurance Incorporated, we insure what others won't. Volcano boarding, covered, space diving, no problem. Competitive black hole surfing, we've got you covered. If it's dangerous enough to be fun, we'll insure it." The founder of Adrenaline Assurance Incorporated was listed as Maximilian Daredevil, whose previous experience included professional, near-death survivor, and recreational physics violator. Dr. Quibbleton Bafflebonk was the galaxy's foremost expert in impossible mathematics, a field that had been created specifically to study phenomena that made regular mathematics cry and hide in a corner. His 17 doctoral degrees included specializations in paradoxical probability, contradictory calculus, and advanced bewilderment theory. He had been called in to analyze the human insurance phenomenon, and after 6 standard hours of investigation, he was displaying symptoms that his colleagues recognized as professional academic meltdown syndrome. "The humans," he announced to the Emergency Scientific Committee, "have somehow achieved what we're terming reverse risk accumulation. Instead of becoming more likely to die with each dangerous activity, they're becoming more likely to survive." Professor Wimblethorpe from the Institute of Universal Constants raised a tentacle skeptically. "That violates the fundamental law of probability decay. If you keep doing dangerous things, you should eventually run out of luck." "That's what should happen," Dr. Bafflebonk agreed, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose worldview had been systematically demolished by a species that apparently treated physics like a suggestion box. "But humans appear to have developed something we're calling experiential immunity. Each near-death experience makes them better at avoiding actual death." He activated a holographic display showing the learning curve of one Brunhilde Crashwell, a human who had made a career out of activities that insurance companies classified as mathematically certain death. Subject Crashwell began her extreme sports career with a 17% survival probability for her first base jump, Dr. Bafflebonk explained. By her 50th jump, her survival probability had increased to 94%, despite attempting increasingly dangerous variations. "How is that possible?" demanded Professor Flibbergibbet from the Academy of Logical Certainties. "We believe humans have developed what can only be described as adaptive recklessness," Dr. Bafflebonk replied. "They learn from almost dying, then apply that knowledge to almost die more efficiently." The display showed Brunhilde's progression from basic parachuting to wingsuit flying, to eventually launching herself off cliffs while wearing nothing but a jetpack she had assembled from spare kitchen appliances. "Note that her insurance premiums should have increased exponentially," Dr. Bafflebonk continued, "but human insurance companies are actually lowering her rates because she's demonstrating improved survival statistics." Professor Wimblethorpe began making the sound his species used to indicate that reality had personally offended them. "But the truly bewildering aspect," Dr. Bafflebonk said, warming to his subject like a scientist who had discovered that gravity was actually optional, "is what we're calling the enthusiasm paradox. The more dangerous an activity becomes, the more humans seem to enjoy it. Their pleasure centers activate proportionally to their proximity to death." The holographic display shifted to show brain scans of humans engaged in various extreme activities. The patterns were unlike anything in the galactic database of sentient species. Traditional risk assessment assumes that intelligent beings avoid death, Dr. Bafflebonk explained, but humans appear to have evolved a neurological system that rewards them for getting as close to death as possible without actually dying. It's as if their brains are playing some sort of cosmic game of limbo with the universe itself. What about their insurance mathematics? Asked Professor Gibberwocky from the Department of Financial Impossibilities. How are they calculating premiums that allow them to remain profitable while ensuring activities that should result in immediate bankruptcy? Dr. Bafflebonk's expression suggested he was about to share information that would fundamentally alter their understanding of economic reality. They're using something called optimistic actuarial science, he said. Instead of calculating the probability of death, they're calculating the probability of almost dying and surviving with an interesting story to tell their friends. The committee members began exhibiting signs of collective intellectual distress. For example, Dr. Bafflebonk continued, pulling up a case study. Maximilian Daredevil's company, Adrenaline Assurance Incorporated, calculates premiums based on what they call the epic story factor. The more spectacular the near-death experience, the lower the premium, because humans will apparently pay extra for the privilege of having a good story. That's not how insurance works, Professor Wimblethorpe protested. It is for humans, Dr. Bafflebonk replied, with the weary tone of someone who had spent too long trying to explain water to fish. They've created an economic model where the product being sold isn't financial protection against death, but rather financial protection against not having sufficiently exciting near-death experiences. He displayed testimonials from human policyholders that made the assembled scientists question whether they were still in the same universe they had woken up in that morning. Here's a quote from Prudence Skydiver, who holds 17 different extreme sports insurance policies. I pay extra for the premium danger package because regular near-death experiences are just boring now. I need to know that if I survive something really spectacular, my insurance company will help me find something even more dangerous to try next week. Professor Flibbergibbet began making calculations on 17 different devices simultaneously, trying to find some mathematical framework that could contain this information. The humans have somehow created an insurance industry that encourages policyholders to engage in increasingly dangerous behavior, Dr. Bafflebonk explained, while simultaneously becoming more profitable as their clients become more reckless. How do they handle actual deaths? Professor Gibberwocky asked weakly. That's the truly magnificent part, Dr. Bafflebonk replied. Death claims are handled by something called the Legendary Status Department. Instead of just paying out benefits, they create memorial extreme sports competitions in the deceased's honor, generate revenue through sponsorships, and use the profits to fund even more dangerous activities for surviving policyholders. The silence that followed was so profound that several committee members checked to make sure the universe was still functioning. Gentle beings, Dr. Bafflebonk concluded, humans have not just broken our understanding of insurance mathematics. They have created an entirely new branch of economics based on the principle that the best way to avoid dying is to practice almost dying until you become really, really good at it. He paused dramatically. And the terrifying part is that their system actually works better than ours. The collapse began on a Tuesday, which was particularly ironic since Tuesdays were statistically the safest day of the week, according to 47 different galactic calendars. Flibbert Wompkins watched helplessly as his company's stock price performed what could generously be described as aggressive gravitational diving across every major galactic exchange. The holographic displays surrounding his office showed a cascade of financial disasters that made the great Rigelian economic meltdown of 2847 look like a minor accounting error. "Sir!" Blunderstook burst into the office, shedding purple scales with the intensity of someone whose stress levels had achieved orbit. "Squishbert's company just declared bankruptcy. Universal Death Guarantee Limited is liquidating all assets. The entire Yarian Statistical Certainty Corporation has been dissolved." "How many does that make?" Flibbert asked, though he already knew the answer would make him wish he had chosen a career in something safer, like professional supernova observation. 47 major insurance companies in the last 6 hours, Blunderstook replied, his voice carrying the tone of someone reading obituaries at a funeral for the concept of mathematics itself. The Rigelian Risk Assessment Consortium tried to restructure their entire business model, but they couldn't figure out how to calculate premiums for activities that violate the fundamental laws of probability. Damn! Through his office window, Flibbert could see other corporate headquarters across the financial district. Emergency evacuation lights were flashing in 17 different buildings as insurance executives fled their offices like passengers abandoning a sinking spaceship. "What about our own situation?" Flibbert asked, though he suspected the answer would involve words like catastrophic and universe ending. "Oh, we're still technically solvent," Blunderstook said carefully, "but only because our computer systems have given up trying to calculate our actual financial position. They keep displaying error messages that roughly translate to 'mathematics has left the building.'" That's when the holographic communication system activated, displaying the smiling face of Maximilian Daredevil, founder of Adrenaline Assurance Incorporated. His appearance suggested someone who had recently survived something that should have been medically impossible and was extremely pleased about it. "Greetings, fellow insurance professionals," Maximilian announced with the cheerful enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered that gravity was negotiable. "I hope you're having a fantastic day watching your companies collapse into financial black holes." Flibbert's primary tentacle began twitching involuntarily. "I'm calling to offer a solution to your current predicament," Maximilian continued. "Adrenaline Assurance Incorporated is prepared to purchase all failing galactic insurance companies at fair market value, which we calculate to be approximately 17 cents and a handful of cosmic lint." "That's impossible!" Flibbert sputtered. "You can't purchase entire civilizations' worth of insurance infrastructure." "Actually, we can," Maximilian replied, his grin widening to proportions that defied several laws of facial anatomy. "See, while you've been focused on preventing people from dying, we've been focused on helping them live better. Turns out that's way more profitable." He gestured to something off-screen, and the holographic display expanded to show the interior of what appeared to be the most successful insurance operation in galactic history. Humans were processing claims while simultaneously engaged in activities that made Flibbert's species break out in nervous rashes. "Meet our claims processing department," Maximilian announced proudly. "They handle all paperwork while bungee jumping because we found that the adrenaline rush improves their mathematical accuracy by 300%. Flibbert watched in horror as humans calculated complex actuarial formulas while plummeting through the air attached to elastic cords. "Our customer service representatives take calls while skydiving," Maximilian continued, "because the wind noise helps them focus on problem solving. And our executive board meetings are conducted exclusively during whitewater rafting expeditions, because we make better decisions when there's a significant chance of drowning." "That's not how business works," Blunderstook protested weakly. "It is for us," Maximilian replied. "We've discovered that humans make better financial decisions when their lives are in immediate danger. Something about the proximity to death clarifies our thinking processes." The display shifted to show Adrenaline Assurance's profit margins, which were not just positive, but were performing mathematical functions that shouldn't have been possible without violating several conservation laws. "Here's our offer," Maximilian said, his tone becoming as serious as someone can sound while apparently hang-gliding during a business call. "We'll purchase your companies, retain all your employees, and teach them how to perform their jobs while engaged in life-threatening activities. Studies show that actuarial calculations improve by an average of 400% when performed during freefall." "You want us to do insurance work while trying not to die?" Flibbert asked incredulously. "Trying not to die is exactly what insurance is about," Maximilian replied. "We've just made the process more honest. Instead of sitting in safe offices calculating other people's chances of survival, our employees experience those chances firsthand. It gives them a much better understanding of risk assessment." Blunderstuck began hyperventilating in 3 different atmospheric mixtures simultaneously. "The beautiful part," Maximilian continued, "is that once your employees learn to perform their jobs under extreme stress, regular office work becomes boring. Productivity increases by an average of 600% because sitting at a desk feels like vacation time." The holographic display showed testimonials from former alien insurance workers who had joined Adrenaline Assurance. They were all smiling with the kind of manic enthusiasm usually associated with religious experiences or complete mental breakdown. Quibblethorpe from Rigel says that calculating mortality rates while volcano boarding has given him insights into probability theory that he never achieved in 40 years of traditional actuarial work. Maximilian read cheerfully. "But what about safety regulations?" Flibbert demanded. "Safety is our #1 priority," Maximilian replied. "That's why all our extreme business activities are conducted with the best safety equipment that money can buy. We're not trying to get people killed. We're trying to get them to understand what it feels like to not be killed when they probably should have been." He paused dramatically, though it was difficult to tell if the pause was for effect or because he was navigating a particularly challenging section of whatever death-defying activity he was currently performing. "The choice is yours," Maximilian concluded. "You can continue watching your companies collapse while clinging to mathematical models that don't work, or you can join us in creating an insurance industry that actually understands what we're supposed to be protecting people from." The communication ended, leaving Flibbert and Blunderstuck staring at each other across an office that suddenly felt very, very safe and very, very boring. 6 months later, Flibbert Wumpkins found himself strapped to a rocket-powered surfboard, calculating insurance premiums while hurtling through an asteroid field at speeds that made light itself feel inadequate. "I think I'm getting the hang of this," he shouted into his communication device, his 7 eyes streaming tears of terror and what he was beginning to recognize as inexplicable joy. The transformation had been remarkable. After accepting Maximilian Daredevil's offer, probabilistic survival solutions had been restructured into practically surviving solutions, and their first quarter profits had increased by 1,200%. Blunderstuck, who was currently performing actuarial calculations while bungee jumping off a space station, had become the company's most productive employee. His stress-induced molting had actually improved his mathematical abilities, because apparently fear-induced adrenaline made Rigelian brains function at peak efficiency. "Sir," Blunderstuck's voice crackled through the communication system, "I've just calculated the risk assessment for the Vegan Death Slug Colony insurance policy, and the numbers are beautiful, crystal clear. I can see mathematical relationships I never noticed before. What had initially seemed like corporate suicide had revealed itself to be corporate evolution. The alien insurance executives had discovered that their species' obsession with safety had actually been limiting their understanding of risk. It's amazing what you can see when you're about to die," called out Quibblethorpe, who was processing claims while tightrope walking between two moons. "I've solved probability equations that have been puzzling mathematicians for centuries." The secret, they had learned, was that humans didn't just tolerate danger, they used it as a tool for enhanced cognition. The fight-or-flight response that other species experienced as panic, humans had somehow converted into a state of hyperclarity. Dr. Bafflebonk, who had initially studied humans as an academic curiosity, was now conducting his research while wingsuit flying through solar flares. His latest paper, Cognitive Enhancement Through Controlled Near-Death Experiences, had revolutionized the field of xenopsychology and had been written entirely during a series of increasingly dangerous base jumps. "The humans were right," he had announced during his last conference presentation, which he had delivered while skydiving through a thunderstorm. "Fear isn't something to be avoided, it's something to be optimized." But the truly remarkable discovery had come when other species began adopting human insurance practices galaxy-wide. Planets that had been considered utterly uninsurable suddenly became profitable as their inhabitants learned to treat survival as an active skill rather than a passive hope. The Kepler sector, which had been hemorrhaging insurance companies for decades due to its extraordinarily hostile environment, was now the most profitable region in the galaxy. The local inhabitants had embraced extreme survival sports and had become so skilled at not dying that their mortality rates had plummeted to near zero. "We're receiving reports from across the galaxy," Maximilian announced during the company's latest board meeting, which was being conducted while the entire executive team navigated a particularly challenging lava river. "Species that have adopted our enhanced risk engagement protocols are showing unprecedented improvements in survival rates." The holographic display showed statistics that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Civilizations were living longer, achieving more, and most remarkably, reporting higher levels of satisfaction with their existence. "The Yarians have started something called competitive accounting," Maximilian continued, "where they balance their planetary budgets while performing death-defying aerial maneuvers. Their economic efficiency has improved by 800%. "The Rigelians have developed extreme engineering," added Brunhilde Crashwell, who had been promoted to Chief Risk Enhancement Officer, "where they design spacecraft while riding those same spacecraft through dangerous cosmic phenomena. Their safety records have actually improved because they now understand firsthand what their vehicles need to survive." What had begun as an insurance crisis had evolved into a galactic renaissance of what humans called living fully. Species across the universe were discovering that their ancestors' cautious approach to existence had been limiting their potential. Flibbert executed a particularly spectacular maneuver around a spinning asteroid, his mathematical calculations flowing with a precision he had never achieved in the safety of his old office. "I understand now," he called out to his team, "why humans were so successful. They weren't just surviving their dangerous planet, they were using that danger to become better at everything." The revelation had been profound. Humans hadn't conquered their Class 15 Deathworld through superior technology or advanced mathematics. They had conquered it by embracing it so completely that danger itself had become their greatest teacher. Every extreme sport, every crazy stunt, every impossible adventure, Flibbert continued, narrowly avoiding collision with a meteor while simultaneously solving a complex risk assessment equation. It wasn't recklessness, it was training. Species across the galaxy were now applying human principles to their own worlds. The formerly peaceful Andromedans had introduced philosophical debate while volcano surfing and had achieved breakthrough insights into the nature of existence. The mathematically obsessed Centaurians had begun calculating pi while free-falling through gas giants and had discovered new mathematical constants that had eluded them for millennia. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation had occurred on Earth itself. As news of their influence spread throughout the galaxy, humans had become the universe's premier experts in what they called survival optimization. Adventure tourism companies were booking clients from 17 different star systems. Humans were teaching alien species how to turn their own planet's dangers into opportunities for growth and development. The beautiful irony, Maximilian observed, dodging a particularly aggressive space squid while reviewing quarterly reports, is that by teaching the galaxy how to embrace danger, we've actually made the universe a safer place overall. The statistics supported his observation. Galactic mortality rates had dropped to their lowest levels in recorded history, not because civilizations were avoiding danger, but because they had learned to engage with it skillfully. Insurance companies were reporting profits that defied economic theory, while simultaneously paying out fewer death benefits than ever before.